There is a date printed in almost every history textbook on Earth, August 24th, 79 AD. The day Pompeii died. There is just one problem. That date is almost certainly wrong. And it took a single line of writing, scratched onto a wall nearly 2,000 years ago, to prove it. In 2018, archaeologists uncovered a charcoal inscription during excavations in Pompeii. The writing referenced a date in October, not August. Suddenly, researchers began re-examining evidence that had been sitting in plain sight for decades. Carbonized fruits harvested in autumn, nuts stored for winter, heavy clothing, freshly sealed wine jars. Piece by piece, the evidence pointed to the same conclusion. Pompeii likely fell in October, not August. A simple copying mistake made centuries ago had found its way into textbooks around the world. But here's the strange thing. That date isn't the biggest misconception about Pompeii. Not even close. Because the deeper archaeologists dig, the more they discover that almost everything we think we know about the city needs a second look. And the most surprising discoveries weren't made during the eruption. They were made nearly 2,000 years later. Before we get there, you need to understand what Pompeii really was. Most people imagine a quiet ancient city frozen in time. The reality was very different. Pompeii was loud, crowded, political, and surprisingly familiar. Its walls were covered with election advertisements. More than 2,800 of them have been discovered. Shop owners endorsed candidates. Bakers endorsed candidates. Wine sellers endorsed candidates. One group even described themselves as late-night drinkers, while publicly supporting a local politician. For a moment, it sounds less like ancient Rome and more like a modern city during election season. And then there was the food. Pompeii contained more than 150 thermopolia, the Roman version of fast food restaurants. People grabbed meals on the go, met friends, discussed politics, and continued their day. When one of these establishments was excavated in recent years, archaeologists found traces of duck, fish, pork, and wine. Someone's final meal had remained preserved for nearly 2,000 years. And if that sounds remarkable, wait until you hear what scientists later found hidden inside the victims themselves. But first, there's another detail most documentaries rarely mention. When Vesuvius erupted, Pompeii was already recovering from disaster. 17 years earlier, a powerful earthquake had devastated the region. Buildings collapsed. Temples were damaged. Homes required extensive repairs. Even decades later, reconstruction was still underway. Some buildings remained unfinished. Some statues had been removed for restoration. Some wealthy families had never fully recovered financially. Pompeii wasn't destroyed during its golden age. It was destroyed while trying to rebuild from the last catastrophe. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If earthquakes had already shaken the city, why didn't more people leave when the mountain began acting strangely? The answer is simple. Because nobody knew what Vesuvius truly was. To them, it was simply part of the landscape. A mountain, not a threat, not a volcano, not a ticking time bomb. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. At approximately 1 o'clock, Vesuvius erupted. A towering column of ash, rock, and volcanic material shot into the sky. It climbed nearly 30 kilometers upward, high enough to penetrate the stratosphere, visible from enormous distances. Across the Bay of Naples, a Roman scholar watched the event unfold. His name was Pliny the Elder. He described the strange cloud as resembling a Mediterranean pine tree, narrow at the base and spreading outward at the top. Today, His observations remain one of the most important eyewitness accounts of a volcanic eruption ever recorded. But Pliny wasn't satisfied with watching from afar. A message arrived from a woman named Rectina. She was trapped near the mountain. Escape by land was impossible. Pliny immediately changed course. What began as scientific observation became a rescue mission. He ordered ships toward the disaster zone. He never returned. Yet his final journey preserved details that would help future generations understand what happened that day. Meanwhile in Pompeii, ash and pumice continued falling from the sky. Hour after hour, roofs became heavier. Buildings weakened. Families sheltered indoors. Many believed they could simply wait for the danger to pass. They had no idea the worst phase of the eruption hadn't even begun. Then everything changed. The enormous eruption column became unstable. It could no longer support its own weight. It collapsed. And what happened next was unlike anything the residents had ever seen. A massive surge of superheated gas, ash, and volcanic material raced outward from the mountain. The phenomenon was so unfamiliar that the people of Pompeii had no word to describe it. No warning. No understanding. No experience with anything remotely similar. And what scientists would later discover about those final hours would overturn assumptions that lasted for generations. Which brings us to the most famous images associated with Pompeii. The casts. Millions of visitors have seen them, photographed them, studied them. Many believe they are looking at preserved bodies frozen in time. The reality is stranger, and in many ways even more powerful. Over centuries, human remains buried in volcanic ash gradually decomposed. But as they disappeared, they left something behind. Empty spaces. Perfect cavities, preserving the exact shape of a person at the moment they were buried. In 1863, archaeologist Giuseppe Fiorelli realized these spaces still existed beneath the ground. He carefully filled them with liquid plaster. When the surrounding ash was removed, human forms emerged. Not the people themselves, but the spaces they once occupied. For generations, that seemed like the end of the story. Then modern technology arrived. Beginning in the 21st century, researchers started scanning the casts using advanced CT imaging. The same technology used in modern hospitals. What they found surprised everyone. The bones were still inside, hidden beneath the plaster. Teeth, skeletal structures, signs of old injuries, evidence of lives lived long before the eruption. One young man showed signs of a healed rib fracture. At some point in his life, he had survived a serious injury. Another discovery was even more unexpected. Researchers identified evidence suggesting one individual had been pregnant. Suddenly, these weren't anonymous figures from history. They were people. Individuals with stories, families, and lives interrupted by a disaster that occurred 2 millennia ago. And just when archaeologists thought Pompeii had revealed most of its secrets, new discoveries began changing the story again. Roughly 1/3 of the city remains unexcavated. Think about that. After nearly 2,000 years of study, an enormous portion of Pompeii is still waiting beneath the ash. And what researchers are finding today is extraordinary. A ceremonial chariot unlike anything previously discovered. Ancient food counters with painted decorations still visible. Rooms that reveal the daily lives of enslaved people. Tools, objects, personal belongings, pieces of history untouched since the 1st century. Then came one of the most significant discoveries of all. DNA analysis. When scientists examined the genetic material of Pompeii's victims, some long-held assumptions immediately began falling apart. The population was far more diverse than researchers had expected. People with ancestry linked to different parts of the Mediterranean world lived side by side in the city. Pompeii wasn't simply a Roman town. It was a crossroads of cultures, a place where people, goods, ideas, and traditions converged. And perhaps that is why Pompeii continues to fascinate us. Because it wasn't a distant world. It was a human world. A recognizable world. One filled with ambitions, routines, friendships, businesses, arguments, celebrations, and ordinary days. Which brings us to one final mystery. When people think of Pompeii, they think of those who remained. But what about those who escaped? Historians estimate that between 11,000 and 20,000 people may have lived in the city. Yet the number of discovered victims accounts for only a fraction of that population. Most people likely survived. Most people got out. And their stories have almost vanished from history. We know far more about the city they left behind than the lives they rebuilt afterward. And then there are the secrets still buried. Hidden beneath unopened streets. Hidden beneath rooms no archaeologist has entered. Hidden beneath 1/3 of a city still waiting to be explored.